would you bother to make art? There would be no need. Art is, you know, the academy. We live in a world where the academy has answers. It's supposed to. People pay money, they've got this thing, they're professors, they have answers. When they can't come up with an answer, then they give you a solution. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that artists are supposed to just ask questions. That's their job. It's the only reason they exist, is to ask questions. Yeah, and every once in a while your question leads somebody else to be able to figure out how to deal with the world as it stands. That question is the important thing, not the answer. Because if that question has asked something, everybody forgets that, you think you're developing. We all think we're getting better at what we do. We're developing. And I don't mean career, and I don't mean things like that. I mean the idea that we're beginning to understand more. If we're beginning to understand, just take it for granted everybody else is too. The world is turning at the same rate that you're turning. You have to give credentials, you have to give some credence. You make something and you present it. If it enters the world, that means that it's, in fact, changing other people's perceptions. The next thing you make has to take into account that perceptions have changed. If not, you've done something. We're trying to give dignity to other people. We're trying to give dignity to materials. But if you don't give dignity to the idea of making art itself, which is that what you have done perhaps has changed the way that we see the world, and use that each time you make a new thing, your horse's ass. I'm serious. And most art turns out because it fits into the society so well, and in fact we have to eat. And in fact, I'm in Belgium, eating well is not bad. And that was January 1st, so I guess it was 67, and there were people in 66 and in 65 who were speaking and talking and making art and showing things out loud. Everything happened all at the same time, and I don't know how. But to make a little sort of memorial to this thing of the 60s, let's just say it was another time. How somebody in Canada, like Ian Baxter and his wife, or Daniel Buren, or Joseph Beuys, or Robert Morris, or you name the list, it's enormous, it's all over the world. How at the same point in time, all of these people, there were no faxes, telephone calls were outrageous, nobody could call, and you wouldn't know, most people didn't even have telephones sometimes. There were no art magazines. How did everybody know? How did in 68, when they got to the Attitude Show, all the artists knew who everybody else was, and they'd go and introduce themselves and tell them they saw this, and they heard this, and they watched this? I don't know. I was too busy doing something. And of course I thought it was going to change the world. But if you want responsibility for having changed the world as an artist, walk outside. It hasn't worked. I believe in making art that doesn't require a metaphor, art that you don't have to accept the value structures of other people in order to use. Don't work. We still have essential racism, essential sexism. Can't even speak about fascism anymore since it's legal in Italy. They have a legal party, okay, so that's over. But the conversation I was having this afternoon with somebody, it's something I've been working on, a set of drawings, is that we're still based in a Hegelian thought. Everything we know is Hegel. This whole collapse economically that's going on, which will probably be disastrous for an enormous amount of people in this room, much less out in the world. We're a microcosm. Is all because capitalism, as we know it, John Adams, is Hegelian. Communism, as we know it, is Hegelian. Kant is Hegelian. Maybe it's time to take the bagel from Hegel. Maybe it's time for us to stand still and not justify our existences by the things that gave credentials and credence and such to things, and justify it by its sensual response at the moment, what its use is. That would be enough now. You see, I have no answers, and that's the problem. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I do know what's wrong. What's wrong is we base our value structure on how we look at art and how we use art, and that's all we should be talking about. Since obviously none of us There's no billionaires here that I can see. So we couldn't get that one straight. It's all based on a Hegelian concept that accepts metaphor. It accepts that if you act a certain way, you are a certain way. If you do this, if you do that. What if art doesn't work that way? What if the reason that Mondrian is a great example. Mondrian is seen as very pure, very this. I don't know what, I'm so knocked out by the seascapes that Mondrian did, but remember, Mondrian was broke, not accepted in New York City, in a very bad time. He had no place else to go. There were people on the other side of the world that were really trying to eat him. Broadway Boogie Woogie. That's totally Mondrian, and yet it's not Mondrian at all. It changed because he found himself introduced into a world that moved in a different way. He found himself in a world where his greatest pleasures, and I'm not a Mondrian scholar, but I am a fan, and he was in New York. And I'd never met him. I mean, it was long before my time being an artist, but he found himself in a place where his great pleasure was dancing to music of his own time. Of his own time. And all of us in this room are still dancing to music that was absolutely a shock in 1954. It changed the whole idea of what music and democracy and other people were, which is called rock and roll. Well, everything we still dance to is still rock and roll, and that's scary. And we're artists, and we're in a position to change things a little bit, and yet we still talk in terms aesthetically that are based on terms that have already been discredited. Very good people like Clement Greenberg, very, very, really serious human beings involved in their hope for a better world, make basic errors about things that we all know for certain. There is no perfect pink. The Darby Bannard situation where he was pushing it. There is no perfect red. No two people, or perhaps one, two in the entire world, can see the same color the same way. So we're talking about the rationalization that I made to make the work that I was trying to make. If nobody can see it the same way, then red is red. Let it be. I did this tape with Catherine Bigelow called Red as Well as Green as Well as Blue, based on a book I had done in England, where, yes, of course, red is supposed to mean revolution. Green is supposed to mean fascism, and blue is supposed to be the color of the worker. Who told you that? Where did that all come from? One person had a red flag, and that all of a sudden became red means that. It doesn't mean that. Red means red. Green means green. And blue means blue. And if you take blue and you mix it with green, you get yellow. You don't. That's the problem. You understand my point. We were basing ourselves on this art appreciation. They never looked at the fact that what made Giotto so interesting, and Giotto so important as a young person to discover, was that his perspective, what he was looking at, was not looking at it from above. He was not making the spectator assume to be what they weren't. Heresy is a thing that I've been working on, and heresy is a very strange thing. You can, in French at least, objectify heresy by just calling it la hérésie and leave off the last E. And it's an object. It's no longer a state, it's an object.